Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name is T. If you're new here, I really do hope everyone's day is going well. Happy Pride! I haven't said much this Pride, but just know that behind the scenes, big things are going on. Celebration is happening.
I've been suffering. I suffered for 19 years. It's time for me to shake my ass on a yacht. In a thong.
Wow. Because we deserve to celebrate, right? Even if you're not out yet, even if you're still trying to figure things out, this is still your pride too. And even if you don't want to celebrate, even if you just don't want to mention it at all and keep things low-key, I am proud of you. And it's funny because even though happiness and celebration is mainly what Pride is known for, let movies and TV tell it, one of the main attractions for our stories is still pain and suffering. And truthfully, this wasn't something that I found particularly alarming, like definitely not bothersome enough to sit down and make a whole video on, until I watched the HBO show Genera+ion, which I enjoyed for the most part, and I actually had plans to do a whole sit down and like analyze each and every one of the characters, kind of similar to how I did in my Grand Army video. But after I finished the show, I went back to see like how the viewers were reacting to it, and what a controversy. Who was really out here acting like that show was the absolute worst thing to come out of 2021? Now, I do have my own critique of the show, which I of course would have shared if that video ever came out. For one, way too much happened, way too fast. The fact that there was, spoiler, the fact that there was catfishing of teachers, deportation, getting your twin sister's boyfriend's in your eye. That sentence was worth the wait, wasn't it? And more. I mean, for fuck's sake, this season only had 8 episodes and they were like 35 minutes each. So yeah, a whole lot going on, a lot of chaos, and yes, that did sometimes make for incoherent storylines, but the show was not terrible. Not even close. A common criticism I saw was that the characters were lacking depth. People felt as though, given the fact that the characters were so young and so stereotypical, they just needed more from them to feel more connected to them. Now, I think that's very interesting. Because I feel as though, had Generation been a show comprised of all straight cisgender characters, it would have been a freeform hit. That shit would have been coming on right after Grownish. Would people have still criticized it? Yes. And you know I would have been one of them. But by and large, I don't believe there would be this widespread devastation and disappointment that people are pretending to have now. So let's talk about this whole character depth thing. Based on my understanding, character depth is generally described as the elements of a character that keeps a viewer hooked and invested. Whether that's by way of relatability, admiration, pity, disgust, whatever it is, it gets the viewer saying, I want to know more. And I found that with cishet characters, depth is often synonymous with things like the interesting way that the character views the world and how that affects their actions. I've seen it synonymous with rebellion. I've seen it synonymous with even their trauma, which is perfectly fine. But that trauma, that rebellion, those life perspectives can be pulled from any corner of their existence and still be seen as deep. Whereas with queer characters, their depth is determined by how the perils of their sexuality affect all of those things, and that sometimes leaves little regard for their full humanity because it may be seen as less dramatically compelling. I am not above admitting that sometimes seeing a character going through some shit does play a role in keeping me invested. So it's really not that far-fetched for me to assume that people wanted to see these characters in Generation go through just a wee bit more in order to feel more connected to them. I feel like there's this norm in media where if you want your audience to feel more connected to queer characters, the most efficient way to do that is to put them through some real fucked up shit. Some fucked up shit that audiences wouldn't necessarily need from cishet characters. In fact, they might even be offended if they see cishet characters going through that. And what I found is, in the queer movies and shows that follow that blueprint, they are often very adorned in awards and accolades. But the actual community of which these movies claim to represent are like, So what I'd like to examine today is, have we grown to enjoy the element of queer pain in media, which would be high-key a problem, or have we gotten used to it? So used to it that we expect it because of trauma culture saturation in the media and the exploitation of queer trauma therein. And I feel it's especially important, especially in a month like Pride, where all of these LGBTQ plus stories are being pushed heavily on streaming services and thus being heavily consumed, that we just take a step back to see if this has any leg to stand on. Queer pain is a phrase I'll be using a lot throughout this video, so let me just be crystal clear on exactly what I mean by that. I do not define queer pain simply as pain felt by characters who happen to have queer identities, but rather pain that is directly caused by or joy that is directly denied because of the way the world reacts to that character's queerness. Common tropes of the sort include the bury your gaze trope, which usually involves giving a queer character a good run, but inevitably killing them off via hate crimes, suicide, sickness, the list goes on. There's also the trans tribulations trope, kind of self-explanatory, but constant body dysmorphia, nothing in life comes easy, society's inability to see the validity in their existence, and dozens of others. I reached out to Rowan Ellis. I know. And Rowan, I gotta say thank you again, because when I reached out to her, she gave me a very clear and obviously very well thought out answer, which helped me tremendously in propelling this video, so thank you. But Rowan says, in terms of young queer pain on screen, I definitely say that there is a fine line between showing the lived experiences of real life people that may well be painful, and such portrayals may therefore be seen as authentic and relatable, especially to those teens going through those difficulties, but also acknowledging that queer young people are at disproportionate risk of self-hatred, mental illness, suicide, etc., and that actually allowing them to see positive portrayals of their identity is also vital. Ooh. Do I love a creator who can admit that multiple things can be true at once? She's truly a gem. But I especially love that last part. As the world evolves, I too wonder if this does any damage to the queer youth coming up. I wonder if they somehow accept these tragic depictions as their fate because they see it so often in media. There absolutely is truth in queer pain, and like Rowan said, it's incredibly beneficial for those who have been through similar circumstances to feel seen and have someone to relate to. And for those of us who can't relate, seeing others in pain that we've never experienced can be a very effective medium of empathy. To empathy. So those are two very compelling advantages. You have visibility for a marginalized group, which is vital, and an opportunity for others to empathize with and try to understand said group. But the thing is, there are other ways to empathize with people, and I wonder why gruesome depictions are the main executions that we get nominated for the Globes and the Oscars and all of that. And I don't feel like wanting non-queer people to understand us is a good enough reason to bite our tongues and not question the integrity of these depictions. So how do we identify when writers are genuinely telling our stories versus exploiting them or sensationalizing them to appeal to the cisgender heterosexual gaze? And whether it's exploitative or not, are these constant depictions encouraging an obsession with seeing queer people tortured in the name of entertainment? For example, you have the more extreme cases with a movie like Pariah, which I don't hate it, but that scene where she comes out to her mother using self-deprecating language, which is her choice, but then her mother beats the absolute living shit out of her. The placement of that scene made it seem as though that was the climax of the plot. And as a queer person, I just don't really know like in what world that would be the height of a person's journey or the height of a person's even couple of days. And even before that scene, Alike being a lesbian seemed to cause distress in damn near every other character's life. Now, while somebody out there sees truth in that tragedy, that story was seemingly told from the perspective of how the cishet world sees Alike rather than how she truly exists, which I'm willing to bet are two completely different things. Another example I could give would be the entirety of the movie Girl. And I want to tread lightly because I don't want to cross over into invalidation territory, but from my point of view, everything from the emphasis put on genitalia via the camera angles or the other character's treatment of her or the self-harm, to the fact that the main character was played by a cis boy, everything that happened in that movie, minus the fact that she had a supportive father, is exactly what I would imagine a closed-minded individual to think life is, or worse should be, for a trans person, to hate themselves or be hated. And again, both of these movies nominated, praised, celebrated for their raw authenticity. But it's like, is that really what it is? Is it really? I'm not a writer, so I can't give you a step-by-step game plan, but as a consumer, I can definitely share ways I feel it's been done correctly. One of my favorite examples would be how they tackle pain on Pose. Pose takes place in the late 80s, early 90s, so bigotry was rampant, discrimination was encouraged, the AIDS epidemic was nearing its peak. Shit was not sweet back then, and they made that very clear. Especially with what happened to Candy, that was and still is one of many gruesome realities for the trans community. And even though we didn't see the act, I felt it just as much. I felt the depth of Candy's character just as much. I felt her impact on her community just as much. And at her funeral, and even in her celebration of life afterwards, I know it meant so much to me, and probably so many others out there, to see that her humanity was not reduced to the perils of her transness, even if that did play a role in her demise. Now, of course, not every single piece of media has to follow that blueprint, but I feel that if pain will be shown, even if a character's sexuality or gender identity is the root of that pain, it's important to acknowledge our full humanity along with that, even if the story doesn't end in resilience. Not for the sake of happy endings or making the audience feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but because these are people. These are people experiencing tribulations, not people who belong to tribulations. Now is a good time to revisit what Rowan said to me. She continues with, teen dramas in general often have a lot of melodrama to them. Skins in the UK is like the classic example. And it might be interesting to look at the fates of the straight cis characters in those same shows and or the prevalence of similarly toned shows about primarily straight cis friend groups. Everyone experiences pain, right? But in that same movie or show, is a straight or cis character's existence predicated around their trauma in the same way that a queer character's is? Are writers using characters' queerness and their lived experiences therein as an influence on how they see and navigate the world, or are we more focused on how their sexuality hinders damn near every experience in life? Take the show Sex Education, for example. Adam's struggle with accepting his bisexuality is just as visible as Maeve's drug-addicted, dysfunctional family background. Is just as visible as Eric, a black boy, an African black boy who takes his boyfriend to church in that same world. See, all of this was happening in that same Sex Education universe. The creators were so brilliant in the fact that they put all of the characters as problems on the same playing field, giving the power back to the audience to decide who they wanted to connect with or relate to the most. The writers didn't universalize queer problems at all. All of the queer people were going through something different. Shit, even all of the black queer people were going through something different. And showing that these characters' problems vary based on the dynamics of their individual lives and not just their individual sexualities. You would think it's so simple, but it just doesn't always go down like that. But that's the type of thing I would like to see more of. Show me the pain, absolutely. I'm not asking for the erasure of these depictions. I'm just hoping for these depictions to not be so reductive, to not be so universalized. Ultimately, there is no quick fix for this, and there is no one group to point the finger at. Because you already know, I would have been did that. But there isn't, because like I said in the beginning, all of these depictions have their downfalls and their benefits just the same. But as consumers who play a vital role in media culture's evolution, I think it would do us good to just think about these things the next time we consume these works. We should just try our best to be conscious of what piques our interest in queer stories and why it does, and what we expect of queer stories and why we do. Thank you all so much for watching this video, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I hope I didn't bring the mood down. I hope I didn't bring the gay, happiness, pride, June 2021 mood down. If I did, I'm sorry, child. But I have good news. Before y'all leave me though, I have two pretty huge things that happened for me these past couple of weeks. Okay, number one, I did an interview with Radar 2021, a channel under, get this, Telemundo. Okay. Second thing, if you follow me on Instagram, you already know that this happened, but I was featured in a Teen Vogue article. What can I say? Basically, at this point, I'm waiting for my invitation to the Met Gala. No, seriously, all jokes aside, I was very honored to speak with such a huge publication and such a major network. So I'll link both the Teen Vogue article and the Radar 2021 video in the description if you want to check it out. And as always, thank you so much for your continued support. None of this would have been possible if y'all didn't fuck with me as hard as you do. And I really, really appreciate that. So thank you times a million. Be sure to leave your thoughts and your comments down below. You know what I love? I would love it if y'all would leave your favorite queer movies, shows, stories, all that down in the comments. The ones that made you feel good, that made you feel proud, that maybe even had some pain in there, but that were depicted in a humane way. Leave that down below because I need more stuff to watch even after this month is over. Ciao. Why I was scared to do this video. Well, not scared, but like slightly nervous. It's probably because the last time I did a queer video, the people were against me. When I posted that video, that was in the middle of one of the busiest months for me. So really, I kind of just posted the video and dipped. Like, I maybe looked at 20 comments and I never looked at that shit again. So then life calmed down for me a couple weeks later, and I went back to that comment section to see what everyone was saying. And
hold on. Bitch!
no, it wasn't that bad. Just a couple disagreements, which is fine. You know, I can't wait to revisit that video and just address the concerns in the comments and talk about whether or not I feel any differently. I actually quite enjoy going back and critiquing my past videos. I do it all the time on Patreon. Every damn thing is on Patreon. How many times I gotta tell you? I'm gonna keep telling you though. Ain't nobody gonna plug me like me. No, but seriously, I just started this new series called The Re-Up, where I react to my old videos, and you know, I just chop it up and see if my thoughts have changed any, if I would do it any differently, etc., etc. So yeah, there's that, along with a whole bunch of other shit that's over there. So if that interests you, go check it out. But even if it doesn't, thank you for watching. I still appreciate you for that. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, however you're feeling today, and subscribe for more content. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.